What's going on, guys? My name is Wade with TechDaily, and in this video, we're going to be comparing two of the most affordable 5G capable smartphones on the market right now. The OnePlus Nord N200 5G and the Samsung Galaxy A22 5G. For well under $300, I think either one of these devices would be a pretty great option, but they each have their own pros and cons, their own standout features, and in this video, I'm going to go over everything you need to know about each device so that you can make an informed decision if you're considering them. There's definitely a lot to go over here, so I won't waste any more time. Let's just go ahead and jump right into it and see what these two devices have to offer. So first things first, let me just quickly talk about the pricing and availability. With the OnePlus Nord N200 5G, this device usually retails for about $240 unlocked on places like Amazon, but recently I've seen its price cut down to just under $200, which I think is a really good deal already. And here in the US, you can also snag this phone from T-Mobile and Metro on contract for free if you're a new customer. So all in all, lots of ways to save money here with this phone. For the Samsung Galaxy A22 5G, this device can also be purchased unlocked for closer to $280 depending on where in the world you live, and that actually makes it the cheapest 5G Samsung device on the market today. Either way you go, I think you'll likely be paying a little more for the A22 5G in the end, but they're both very affordable options, obviously. And if you're interested in doing some comparison shopping of your own, I'll leave some links down below in video description to where you can get these phones at their cheapest current prices. So check down there for all the deals and discounts. Physically, I think it's pretty obvious that these two phones look very different. And right off the bat, size-wise, we're working with some different dimensions. The N200 5G is the smaller of the two. It comes in at just shy of 6.5 inches, that's the screen size, while the A22 5G is a 6.6 inch device. Now, that doesn't sound like a huge difference, but you can probably tell that the OnePlus is smaller, shorter, and slimmer in pretty much every direction. And while getting a really big phone for cheap, like the A22 5G, is great, I think there's some advantage in getting a smaller, more compact, more comfortable device in the hand like the N200 5G. It's a little less of a stretch to reach the corners and sides, and I think that might be helpful for some people. Also, with the design, there's some differences here too. The N200 5G has a corner hole punch selfie camera up top, while the A22 5G has a teardrop notch. Down below, the bottom chin on the A22 5G to me seems a little larger too. And altogether, that means that the N200 5G has the better screen-to-body ratio. Around back, both phones are made of plastic, but the color and finish are obviously done a little differently. They both actually have a smooth matte feel that sort of mimics frosted glass, but I think I like the blue and white fade on the OnePlus just a little more here. Either way, both phones look really nice. They have a metal-like frame as well. The N200's is polished, the A22's is a similar matte finish. There's no waterproofing or IP rating or wireless charging on either device, so keep all that in mind. All in all, definitely good looking and pretty unique devices all around. Taking a look around at everything else, on the left side, both phones have a SIM and SD card slot for expandable storage, which is great. The N200 5G also has the volume buttons there. Those are on the right side on the A22 5G, along with the power button, which doubles as a fingerprint sensor on both phones, which you can see down there. Down below, the headphone jack, USB-C port, and single speaker setup are all basically the same, and around back, the triple lens camera setups for both are there, which I'll go more in depth with in just a little bit. Jumping back to the fingerprint sensors, with this, I love the placement and setup on both phones. I'm glad to have this for sure. Speed-wise, the N200 5G is pretty decent in waking the phone and getting to the home screen, but I think compared to the A22 5G, it is just a little bit slower at times. In fact, you don't ever really see the lock screen with the A22, and I consider its fingerprint sensor to be particularly quick. Now, you can also use Face Unlock on both phones as well, which is great, and side by side you can see that more often than not, once again, it's the A22 5G with the advantage in speed. Either way you go though, you're getting fairly fast unlocking methods with both phones, but I think the advantage here goes to the A22 5G. With the speaker setup, like I mentioned, both phones have just the single downward firing speaker. It sounds totally fine. I do think the N200 5G can get a little louder at max volume, but here's an audio sample for both so you can get an idea of the actual sound quality for yourself. So now let's dive a little deeper here with the displays, because out of everything, this I think is where there's a ton of value offered on both of these phones. Now, the 6.49-inch screen on the N200 5G is an IPS LCD panel with a resolution of 2400 by 1080 that crams in some 405 pixels per inch, which in general I think is a pretty respectable setup for a device like this. Similarly, the 6.6-inch screen on the A22 5G is also an LCD panel with a 2400 by 1080 resolution at 399 pixels per inch, and it looks equally as good. I think with just your average everyday viewing experience, both these phones look bold and colorful, they get plenty bright enough, and for content consumption or anything else, they offer a solid setup from a normal viewing distance. In fact, with phones from Motorola and other Samsung devices even offering 720 resolution screens at a higher price tag too than either one of these phones, I'd go as far as to say that you're getting pretty good value with the A22 5G and the N200 5G, as strange as that may sound. But it goes one step further. Both of these phones also offer a 90Hz refresh rate mode, and that I think is the killer feature here. With this, you get a fast, smooth, and ultra-responsive feel with every tap, touch, and swipe. The phones are snappy with everything you do, and really this is a feature that used to be reserved for $1,000 devices. Getting it on these budget phones nowadays is a great add-on, and it's something I think a lot of people will not only notice right away, but fully appreciate. All in all, I consider these displays on these two devices to be fairly equal. But not only that, you're getting that added benefit of 90Hz as well, so it's a better than average setup and a great viewing experience for the price, no matter which way you go. Up to this point, I think I consider these two phones to be pretty equal in what they offer, but the real factor that differentiates them from one another at this point is going to be the performance. First off, let's talk specs. Inside, the OnePlus Nord N200 5G is powered by Qualcomm's Snapdragon 480 5G chipset, 4 gigs of RAM, and 64 gigs of internal storage. With the A22 5G, this phone can be configured in a few different ways, but mine here has the MediaTek Dimensity 700 5G chipset inside. It's the one with 6 gigs of RAM and 128 gigs of storage. Now I know that doesn't exactly make this a fair and equal test, but here's the first thing to consider. The N200 5G can't be configured any other way. What you see is what you get, and you can't buy any more RAM or any more built-in storage. At least with the A22 5G, there's the option to bump up the RAM and internal storage if you want to do that, and you'll see the real-world difference in doing just that. With the Geekbench scores first, you can see that we do get a little higher single-core and multi-core score with the A22 5G, and that is the first indication that the Samsung devices may be a little more powerful. With a side-by-side speed test, I think you'll find that that is going to be the case in real-world conditions too. Now, there's more than just the internal specs to consider here. Obviously, while both these phones ship with Android 11, they each have their own sort of flair, with OnePlus's Oxygen OS and Samsung's One UI Core, and maybe the animations and overall optimization come into play here a bit with how these phones launch and load apps, but 9 times out of 10, if you're just looking at speed, it looks to me like the A22 5G is the faster device. And I think this makes sense. Not only is the MediaTek processor inside the A22 newer and objectively more powerful than the Snapdragon inside the OnePlus device, the OnePlus is also at a slight disadvantage with RAM as well, which means the more apps it loads up, the slower it might get. Now overall, I don't necessarily think performance is an issue on either phone, certainly not the Nord and especially not the A22, but I just think that this is an instance where the Nord probably should have packed a little more. If you're just looking at overall bang for your buck, the A22 is gonna be the better value, but you sort of have to decide a couple of things. Do you prefer OnePlus's unique software touches and user experience? Are you more of a casual smartphone user anyway who doesn't necessarily push the device too hard? If either one of those are a factor for you, the N200 is a great option. Otherwise, I think once again, the advantage here is just going to go with the A22 5G. With the battery capacity and longevity, interestingly enough, we've got similar 5,000 milliamp capacity batteries inside both phones. And while there are obviously some other things to consider, I think generally speaking, you'll find similar battery life from both phones. These are day-and-a-half devices in my personal experience, especially if you aren't a heavy user, so that's great. And as far as charging speeds, OnePlus actually has a slight advantage advantage here with 18 watt support versus 15 watt with the A22. Neither phone has wireless charging, like I mentioned earlier, or any other charging or power features. So all in all, I think this is pretty even, but your experience may vary based on your unique smartphone usage. Finally, let's talk about all those camera lenses around back. Now, hardware-wise, the N200 5G packs in a 13 megapixel main lens, 2 megapixel macro lens for up-close pictures, and a 2 megapixel depth sensor to help with portrait shots. The A22 5G, on the other hand, offers a crazy 48 megapixel lens, 5 megapixel ultra-wide, and a similar 2 megapixel depth sensor. Just on these lens setups alone, I like what Samsung offers here. The main lens is powerful, the ultra-wide is useful, and the depth sensor, I guess, is helpful enough. To me, the macro lens on the N200 is kind of a waste. With the selfie cameras though, the N200 actually has the advantage here with a 16 megapixel shooter versus just an 8 megapixel lens on the A22. And inside the camera app, there's even more to the story. Overall, both phones offer a ton of great useful shooting modes and add-ons you used to not be able to find on more budget-friendly devices like these, such as night mode, slow-mo video, pro controls, and a whole lot more. Also, OnePlus cameras have that little AI distinction, and this mode allows you to automatically enhance the subject or scene for a better shot. Now, technically, the A22 5G also has a scene optimizer, but it's just not as advertised as a standout feature. The A22 also has a few little extra tweaks and settings. There's obviously the 48 megapixel shooting mode, up to 2K video recording, which is sort of interesting. I personally think I'd rather have the A22 5G at this point for shooting just on capabilities and options alone, but jumping to some real-world side-by-side shots, you can see there's a lot more to consider here. With a simple selfie to start, I actually like the color and skin tone on the N200 5G over Samsung's offering here, I think. It's more natural and accurate, there's less smoothing, more color, and it's the same with a portrait selfie too, I think. Detail-wise, it's tough to see, but they're comparable. I don't necessarily think there's any advantage here yet. With the rear camera though, that's where the A22 5G certainly pulls ahead, at least with its ability to capture the little stuff. With color and skin tones, these results are even further apart now, and I kind of have concerns with both. It's a bit too saturated on the OnePlus, it's a bit too pale with the Samsung, though I think more realistic and true to life in this case. Things even out a bit with the portrait shot, and either result here I'm super happy with. Obviously, I think you just have to decide what sort of look you might like with your shots, what color profile works best, what kind of detail you need, but really both these phones offer surprisingly good cameras for the price. And this I think is where both these manufacturers have put a lot of time and effort in with their budget phones, and it's obviously really paid off. So all in all, like I said at the start, I think both these phones do have their own pros and cons. With the OnePlus Nord N200 5G, I think this phone overall looks a little nicer from the back and more modern from the front too. It's obviously a little more affordable, which could be a factor. I think OnePlus's Oxygen OS is also really nice to use. It has its own fanfare. But with the A22 5G, you're getting better overall internal specs, a slightly bigger display, more camera capabilities. You're certainly paying more for all that though, but value-wise, I think that's what I would prefer in the end personally. But what do you guys think? Which device do you prefer? Let me know in the comments down below. I'd love to know your thoughts, of course. But hopefully you guys did enjoy this video. Be sure to follow TechDaily on Twitter and subscribe to the TechDaily YouTube channel if you haven't already. And I'll see you guys later.